This morning's reading is taken from the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verses 9 to 10 and 13 and 14. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the book was opened. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. And to finish, Mark 10, verse 45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Please sit. Yeah, God, we pray that as we hear those words, as we reflect on them, you would work in us and among us by your Spirit. Give us new life as we look upon Jesus and see both as glorious King and a servant. Amen. I've got a little picture for you. It is a bit of ancient graffiti. It was discovered in Rome in the 19th century. There's a line drawing next to it so you can see it a little bit more clearly. You can tell that it's a man hanging on a cross, but he's been portrayed with the head of a donkey. And next to him is another man with his hands raised as if in worship. The inscription says, "Alex worships his God." Alex worships his God. You see, Alex's friends, perhaps his co-workers, mock him. They're mocking him and his new religion. How ridiculous to worship someone who was crucified. Because dying on a cross then gave you about as much dignity as being on a sex offenders registry does today. It is the most shameful thing that could happen to you. His friends may have thought, you claim that this guy is a king. What kind of a king gets crucified? Only a defeated one. Only one who's been shamed. It's repulsive to them, embarrassing. Even the local magistrate has more power than that, they'd have thought. Alex, you must be a fool, because who else would worship a God like this? Now think about it. Who would you vote for? The candidate who exudes strength, who promises to put money in your pocket and keep the streets safe? Or the guy who you would be embarrassed to be associated with? It's a no-brainer. When we read Mark's gospel, he announces Jesus as the King of God's kingdom. But then as we read, we discover that this king will be crucified. How do these things fit together? Well, Mark shows us that if we are to take Jesus seriously, we need to get both how glorious a king he is and that he is a servant. So first, the glorious king. Jesus sometimes in the Gospels refers to himself as the Son of Man. Now, in Mark's Gospel, Jesus only starts to use that title frequently from the middle of the account, once his followers have started to understand who he is. You see, they start to get, as they listen to him, as they see all he does, that he's the king. But they're still thinking too small. They have in mind earthly kings, like Herod, who ruled over a fixed area. They have real power, real authority. But it only goes so far. Now, frankly, I think many of us here would acknowledge that Jesus is king. But we have the same struggle as Jesus' first followers. There are people in our day-to-day lives who exert greater power over us, whose voices we listen to and obey. It may be your boss who has considerable control over your time and state of mind. It might be the chancellor whose budget speech has a direct impact on your weekly shop. It might be someone at the Home Office who's assessing your visa application, or a parent, or a teacher. See, their power feels immediate. If something goes badly, we fear the impact it'll have on our lives. And Jesus, in that moment, fades into the background. Is he just another authority figure like them? King on Sundays, but his rule only goes so far. On Monday, it's my boss who dominates. Well, Jesus says to his followers, let me show you the kind of king I am. I am the Son of Man. Now, the Son of Man is a title from Daniel chapter 7. The book of Daniel was written to reveal God's rule over the whole of human history. God's people had been defeated by a great empire. Daniel and his countrymen were taken as exiles to Babylon. But even over that, God ruled. He is the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. In chapter 7 of Daniel, he has a vision that gives us a glimpse of the heavenly throne room. Now, the Ancient of Days that we read about there is God himself. And he takes a seat in a courtroom where verdicts are given and sentences are handed down. He sits on this flaming throne with wheels. It's a wild picture. But the idea is that God is enthroned. He has absolute authority. He rules, and he rules everywhere. He doesn't just rule over a local area. He rules everywhere. And the fire is a picture of his judgment. And boy, does he judge. He judges human kingdoms that stand against him. Kingdoms like Babylon, which appeared invincible at that time, but one day would pass away. The key bit for us is verse 13, where a new character enters the scene, one like a son of man. He's able to enter the very presence of the Ancient of Days because he is worthy, and he is given the authority to rule. So verse 14, he is given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all peoples and nations and languages should serve him. Do you see the scope of his rule? Do you see what he has authority over? Everything. Everyone. There is no square foot anywhere in the universe that is not his. Now that is power. That is absolute authority. And his dominion, it's an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away. His kingdom, one that shall not be destroyed. Earthly kings come and go. They plot and scheme. Political fortunes turn. Empires rise and fall. They seem invincible at their height, and then one day they crumble, and another rises up to replace them. Over all of that, age after age, is this king and his kingdom, which will never pass away. The exiles in Babylon needed to know that. We need to know that. The king of Babylon wasn't ultimate. The king of God's kingdom is. His kingdom endures. God's people were suffering in Babylon at that time, but they needed to know that God was in control even over that. He would restore them because he'd set his love upon them. So when Jesus comes along and he says he is the Son of Man, he is laying claim to this identity. He's saying, I'm that guy. I'm the Son of Man. I rule everything. I am the King of Kings. Do you get it? He is bigger than those immediate powers in our lives that we fear. He's mightier than the most enduring and terrifying empires. And he's saying to us, I have a claim on you. I have a claim on you. All people, all nations, people of every language will serve him. That's absolute. In my last year at primary school, I was a prefect. Now, it's helpful for you to know that I was a rule keeper and I had a healthy fear of authority. So if a teacher told me to do something, I very quickly did it. But sometimes the head teacher gave a prefect a special job. And then if the teacher came up to you and asked what you were doing or told you to do something else, you could just appeal to the higher authority. The head told me to do this, so I can't do that. See, the honor that the head teacher was due, the obedience that she was owed, drove the fear of the lesser authority away. So even though that teacher was standing in front of me and I was shaking in my boots, I could say, no, I have to do this because the head told me to. I can tell my boss today that I'm not going to fudge the numbers because King Jesus is my higher authority. I honor my work commitments, but I also honor my commitment to my church family because they are the people, you are the people of King Jesus. It honors the King when I keep you as a priority in my life. Jesus is that higher authority. The other thing that happened when the head teacher gave you a job was that you got to act with her authority. So I could speak to my peers with real boldness because it's as if she was right there standing next to me. That's what that little badge that said prefect did. It gave you that authority. When King Jesus sends us out, he sends us out with his royal authority. He has made us sons and daughters. He's clothed us with white robes. He's given us a throne, a crown, the honor of feasting at his table. This is who we now are. And so we are his agents in the world. We walk around carrying his name. We walk around with his authority. We can speak and act with boldness in this world. God has appointed a king over his kingdom. And when we hear that title, Son of Man, we are to behold the radiant glory that comes off him, the grandeur of his presence, the weightiness of his majesty, his towering greatness. That is the Son of Man. That is our King Jesus. But that's only half the picture. The glorious King is also a suffering servant. Jesus says in Mark 10, the passage that we read, even the Son of Man, that guy, came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He's saying, yes, I am that glorious King, but I am the sort of King who bends down to serve. Jesus suffers for his people. He places our good above his comfort. Now, the prophet Isaiah had spoken of this servant. God would use him to rescue his people and establish his rule. So Isaiah 42, this is what it says. Behold my servant whom I uphold, my chosen in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him. He will bring forth justice to the nations. He won't cry aloud or lift up his voice or make it heard in the street. A bruised reed he will not break, and a faintly burning wick he will not quench. He will faithfully bring forth justice. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth, and the coastlands wait for his law. Our mighty King is gentle. He's tender-hearted. He doesn't break bruised reeds. He doesn't snuff out dimly burning wicks. He mends them. He fans them into flame. In our experience, those who are gentle tend to lack strength and force when it's called for. Those who are strongest tend to lack the capacity for gentleness and restraint. But Jesus is both. He's perfectly gentle and wields awesome strength. The mighty arm with which he rules is the same arm with which he cares. And it is his work as the servant that establishes his rule. He will not grow faint or be discouraged till he has established justice in the earth. Meekness, humility, gentleness, patient submission to God's will is not weakness. Meekness is not weakness. Jesus is humble and strong. Now, in Isaiah 53, another servant song, we discover what the work of the servant is. He would suffer, he would be killed, and then he would live again. In doing so, he would bear the sin of his people and give his life as an offering for their guilt. That is how he rescues. That is where restoration begins. And so let's come back to Mark 10. The Son of Man came not to be served. He's not like the kings of the world. People with power usually use their power to serve themselves, for their enrichment, their security, their own pleasure. That's why we are so suspicious of those in authority, because we expect them to abuse their power. The King of Kings is not like that. He did not come to be served, but to serve. The day before he died, Jesus gathered with his disciples for a meal. He wrapped a cloth around his waist, bent down, and washed their feet. Now, that wasn't just an unpleasant job. It was reserved for the lowest servant. In a culture that valued honor, it was not an honorable thing to do. But he did it because that embodied who he is. He makes himself low because his rule is not about putting himself first. He has absolute authority. His glory is unmatched, but he puts the needs of the weak and failing first. On my wedding day, I washed my wife's feet. It was a promise to serve her. It was easy then. Her feet were clean. She looked beautiful. The act actually gave me honor. But serving in unglamorous ways years later isn't easy. It's costly. It's exhausting. It's unseen. There's nobody there to say, well done. The bend of my heart is to serve myself. It's to put me first. When I serve others and I get it right, I feel like a hero. But when I'm getting it wrong, it's amazing how sneaky my heart is. It's able to twist that into a feeling of being unappreciated for all of the times I do get it right. That's what our hearts do. Our hearts twist even our service into serving ourselves. That's what we're like. But King Jesus is not like that. He serves because that is fundamentally who he is. He's a servant. He came to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's the focal point of his service, laying down his life. That's how far he goes. He doesn't just talk about crossing mountains, climbing mountains, and crossing oceans out of love. He actually does it. He puts his life down. And that life is a payment, it's a ransom. It was the price to buy his people out of slavery to sin. So now, if we've come to Jesus, sin is no longer the power that controls us. Instead, we belong to God. It is God's power that is at work in us. We can serve him. We can give him our worship. There is now a new way for us to live. And the pattern of Jesus' life teaches us what the pattern of our life becomes. Because he rules in power, we are royal representatives. Because he is a servant, we give of ourselves in humble service. And the order is important. It is suffering first and then glory. Suffering first and then glory. You see, Jesus saw both of those things as inseparable. They go together. His death on the cross and his glorious rule. The cross looked shameful. It looked like a defeat. But the cross was actually a display of his glory. His death was the great victory. Listen to Jesus. This is him at his trial. He's about to be crucified. You can't get lower than this. And this is what happens. The high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man," remember that glorious King, "seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven." This is a man on death row saying this. The cross and his enthronement cannot be separated. Hebrews 12 puts it like this. Jesus, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. The shame of the cross and the glory of his enthronement go hand in hand. Jesus is both the Son of Man, the conquering lion, and the suffering servant, the lamb who was slain. He is a king who humbles himself to serve. So let's come back to Mark 10 and the context of this statement of Jesus. James and John, two of his followers, were asking for glory and power now. They were still thinking small. They were thinking of an earthly kingdom. And they were asking to sit at Jesus' right and his left hand. You see, at this point, they haven't yet understood that to share in Jesus' glory is to share in his suffering. This is how Jesus responds. You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles, of the nations, lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The pattern of Jesus' life is the pattern for his followers. Now, how does this play out for us? Perhaps the band can come up as we reflect on this. You see, apart from Jesus' ransom-paying death, sin dominates. Sin expresses itself in our preoccupation with being first, with being the wisest, with being the greatest. Even our most selfless acts are bent in towards us. Give us power, influence, wealth, and what do? We use it to strengthen our position. But Jesus' sacrificial service changes everything. He frees us from sin's power, and he animates us with his power so that we become like him. Like him, we are freed to put others before ourselves. Jesus' crucifixion is not something to be ashamed of. Alex's friends had it wrong. Alex wasn't a fool. Alex got it. It is something to be awed by, the crucifixion of Jesus. It is something to adore him for, to worship him for. It is strength that is made perfect in humble service. And that shapes the people that we become. Because like Jesus, we can set aside the stuff that we normally boast about. our social status, our education, our wealth, our reputation. We don't use those things for our advantage like people around us do. We can bear the cost, the discomfort, the risk to our safety, even the shame of serving others, including those we find difficult to love. We might face insult and opposition. Jesus did. We'll put worldly desires and ambitions to death, like career advancement or material security, or trying to get the best for our children. We will let the world's praise pass us by. We don't need people to talk about how amazing we are. We will go to dangerous places. We'll face loss to love others as we proclaim the message of a servant king. Let me briefly tell you the story of John Peyton. He and his wife were missionaries to islands in the South Pacific. And when they announced to their church that they were going to go to this place, one of the elders came to them and said, "You shouldn't go there, because 20 years earlier, the first Christians to set foot on that island were killed within minutes of arriving." And you know what John Peyton said? John Peyton said, "Well, the same future is yours. You're going to be eaten by worms. What difference does it make whether I'm eaten by worms or whether I'm eaten by cannibals? What matters is the glory of our King, Jesus, and speaking his name." And so they went. They were willing to go to dangerous places. They were willing to face loss because they got it. Now, living like this might sound impossible, but it is possible with Jesus. Our confidence is not in our ability to deny ourselves. Instead, we run to Jesus. He gently restores us. He strengthens us who are bruised and broken so that we can become servants like him. Our royal status, the authority that we bear as Jesus' representatives, goes hand in hand with sacrificial service. We don't need to be timid or fearful. We can speak of Jesus with absolute conviction and boldness. And we don't need to chase power to advance. We can be servants wholeheartedly for the joy and the glory that is set before us. We are sent with authority, and we are sent to serve. Let's stand as we pray, and then we'll come to the Lord's table.